What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. This is going to be a review on the Eternals movie. Now this movie, it is a movie but I'm going to go ahead and have a pros and cons section and a spoiler section at the end. This review will remain spoiler free mostly up until the end, so I'm going to have chapters so you can navigate your way through this video to avoid spoilers. With that out of the way, let's get into the pros. So the Eternals, directed by Chloe Zhao, sees 10 immortal beings come back into the limelight after living amongst humans for thousands of years to defeat a common threat. You come to learn that the Eternals have been on Earth for 7,000 years, and you also learn that almost every advancement, progression, and basically anything humans do has in some way come from these Eternals. They help us grow food and helped us manifest our technology, which kind of takes away from the ingenuity of man a little for me. It is an interesting take, and it really does provide a bit of perspective to the MCU, and it really fleshes out in some sense that there are much bigger players out in the universe that we never knew of. So the next natural question after learning that they have been living on our planet for 7,000 years is, well, where the hell have they been? What have they been doing in the last few conflicts shown in the MCU? Well, the movie does a fairly okay job of explaining it, albeit it's a little lazy. Because they were basically instructed by a higher powered being known as the Celestial to never get involved in human conflicts unless there is something called a deviant presence, and I'll get more into those in the spoilers section. Now moving on to the cast, the director had an almost impossible job here of introducing and balancing 10 brand new characters to the MCU in a way that will make us care for these characters and ultimately make us root for them. So how did the director do? Well, on the whole, I think she did an okay job, and it's probably the best that could have been done in retrospect. Now the movie does give each Eternal their time to shine, however there are obvious standouts that the film wants you to focus on more, such as Icarus and Cersei, but it is kind of done in a way where it doesn't feel like value has been removed from other cast members. I would have liked to have more screen time for other Eternals, but again, this is always going to be an impossible task, but Chloe did a really good job for a 2.5 hour runtime. Now the acting from the cast members were great, though you come to expect that from the caliber of the actors involved in this film, and a large part of the fun in this film was discovering what different powers and abilities each Eternal had and how that was visually conveyed on the screen. My favorite Eternals by far were Makari and Gilgamesh. Makari has super speed and hands down has got to be one of the most best represented speedsters on screen ever. Visually this film is absolutely beautiful, and Chloe completely understood the importance of wide shots to really capture the importance and impact of what was being shown. There are so many scenes in this film that are purely breathtaking and wallpaper worthy and really help convey the size and grandeur, especially when looking at Celestials. Now this movie has some major impacts moving forward in the MCU. When I say major, I mean absolutely huge, that quite literally change the way that you look at the MCU, both from a past movie perspective and movies moving forward. Some of the events that play out make Thanos snapping half of all life out of existence look like child's play. Looking back at the MCU after watching this film, it did take away some of the impact just knowing what else is out there now and just how big other threats really are, but I guess that's just the nature of the world building that I found fascinating. You don't know what you don't know, and it's so great being introduced to new beings that truly make Earth feel entirely insignificant. The movie brought a surprising amount of perspective. Whether that is good or bad for you, well, it's your personal preference. So to wrap up the pros, the cast was great, acting was great, most of the CGI was decent, and the visual set pieces were very interesting. I really like the take that all human history has in some way been influenced by these beings, and I felt that it was a great spin on our mythology and stories. However, I understand not everyone will like that. Aside from basically being immortal, these characters are flawed in their own way, which make them intriguing to watch, and there was a decent amount of chemistry between the characters, and each character was given their time or some time to shine to really show why they are on the team. Let's move into the cons. Now keep in mind, I did like the film, however I have a lot of cons. There were some very questionable decisions made in this film. The movie, the plot, the character motivations, and the overall feel of the film was completely contrived. I'll explain this more in the spoiler section, but it was just quite a mess. One of the major cons was balancing all the Eternals. The movie is extremely long, and one part of that is due to the enormous task of introducing 10 new characters, plus side characters, plus making us care for those characters, and also creating compelling villains for the Eternals to fight, as well as a decent backstory to justify them turning up in a universe where something like 23 to 25 movies along with other shows under its belt. It's a huge ask. Sadly, it doesn't balance everything that well. Now, I do say in the pro section of this review that it does as good of a job as it could, but that job is just not good. It's so obvious that more time was needed with each Eternal because I really didn't care for most of them. I found a lot of them to be one-dimensional and they were just completely wasted. The movie should have either taken 4 to 5 Eternals out or made this a 6 to 8 episode series on Disney+. They're trying to push Cersei as a leader or prime Eternal, but throughout the entire movie, she does nothing to justify or show any qualities of leadership to justify why she is better than anyone else in the team of being the next prime Eternal. Gilgamesh, for example, would be my pick because he took Thena under his wing when no one else wanted to for the longest time and risked his life to help her. Cersei never displayed any moments like this, so it was hard to take her seriously as the next chosen leader. Now, by making this a movie over a series, interesting characters and stories tied to characters cannot be fully explored. For example, Phastos has one of the more interesting dilemmas in the film, where he helps create technology for mankind, and then mankind turns the technology into nukes and atom bombs, so he feels somewhat responsible. We're told that he is done with humans and he's abandoned them a long time ago, but in the very next scene, we see he's married and has a kid. So we don't get to see what caused him to move from one state of abandonment to being in a relationship. His whole development and change is covered in one line, saying that his family is his reason to keep going. And the audiences are just meant to accept that. He questioned whether humans were even worth saving at one point, and that's a pretty dark thing to come back from and just simply flip on the next scene. What caused that change? Where did that guilt go? It's never shown. The deviants, for the most part, were simply just large demon dogs or some variation of other animals with slight visual differences between them. When you match them up against almost immortal characters, it's really not that interesting. I felt that with how creative the rest of the film was visually, they could have come up with much better designs. One deviant does evolve to a point where he becomes quite intelligent, but the film does nothing with him. If he wasn't even in the film, it wouldn't have made a single difference. Now, just like every other MCU film, there is yet another giant CGI battle at the end, and holy shit, it was bad. It felt like they ran out of money because it literally looked like a PS4 gameplay trailer. It was bad. It's even worse than the final fight in Black Panther for me. This film also has a dilemma regarding its power struggles. The film sets up the Eternals as being these incredibly powerful, immortal beings, but they're being introduced into a universe where you already have incredibly heavy hitters like Thor, Doctor Strange, or Captain Marvel. You look at the deviants and you see just how much the Eternals are struggling against them, some just straight up running away. Then you remember the other MCU heavy hitters, and you can't really picture them having as much of a bad time fighting them as these Eternals are. Thor, Captain Marvel, and Doctor Strange would just make quick work of these deviants, which really just made the Eternals feel kind of useless. Now, a film like this can only occur in a universe that's already been established, but that's a double-edged sword because then you're constantly making comparisons of the Eternals to the other characters in this universe. As a result, the Eternals not only conveyed as weak, but they're also just not as interesting as the other characters. Now, to wrap up the cons, the story is convoluted, more on that in the spoiler section. Characters aren't given enough time to justify their development, motivations, or change in ideals. Characters are fairly one-dimensional and only serving one character trait to push the narrative forward. The deviants weren't very interesting, and they made the Eternals look incredibly weak and therefore kind of useless in comparison to other characters within this same universe. Now, I have specific points I want to raise, mostly cons, but they are spoilery. So we're going to move into the spoiler section now, but if this is where you jump out, I want to thank you for watching. And always, if you like the video, please go ahead and leave it a like and sub to the channel, and come back to this video and comment to let me know what you think of the movie once you've actually seen it. So spoiler section starting now, here's your warning. Now, the film establishes that the Eternals are sent to the planet to farm life and energy to birth a new Celestial, and you cannot get involved unless deviants are involved. Okay, cool. The movie sets those rules. No interventions unless there is a deviant. They then said that they couldn't get involved with Thanos snapping half of existence out of the universe, but if half of all life is snapped, life equals energy for these Celestials, so that means that half the life/energy is gone for the development and birth of these Celestials, which directly impacts the Eternals' own mission. Surely they could justify getting involved there. Thanos also does have the deviant gene in him, so they could even justify it that way. It was another example of introducing characters much later on in the MCU, saying they've been there the whole time, but giving some stupid, lazy, nonsensical reason as to why they were never there for past conflicts. Cough cough, Captain Marvel. And for a rule of not interfering, my god do they interfere a lot. They help grow food, they give technology, they even controlled humans in a war. So the movie constantly jumps back and forth between we are helping the humans develop to farm energy to no, we can't get involved at all even though half of our energy will be at stake here. Just pick one and stick with it. It was so frustrating having the rules constantly changed on you. Sprite sucked. She really sucked. She's lived for these Eternals for 7,000 years, these guys were her family, and just because Icarus wants to remain loyal to the Celestials and end the planet, she flips on a dime because she has a crush on Icarus? It was the laziest way to have a character's motivations flip. She stabs Cersei and is totally okay with Icarus almost killing the members of her so-called family. For a movie that pushes the idea that everyone here is family, they do such a poor job of showing it. And then when you think about it, what was going to be her plan in the end? Destroy the Earth with Icarus, possibly have him kill other Eternals, and then what? She's still stuck in a kid's body. Icarus isn't going to look at her any differently. It was just an absolute useless turn of events. It added nothing of value. Then when it's all over, she comes back to the Eternals that she double-crossed as if nothing happened and everyone else was just cool with it. Then Cersei somehow turns Sprite into a human to age and die, when the movie only ever showed Cersei's abilities to be matter manipulation. Where did this power come from? It's just not explained at all. It's bad writing and really poor execution. Another example of really bad writing is with Phastos. He initially also refused to help the Eternals save Earth from this Celestial being born because he wanted to be with his family, but he failed to see the importance of the matter at hand. If this Celestial being birthed on Earth gets out, there will be no Earth and therefore no family. For someone who is 7,000 years old, it was such a dumb decision. How do you not realize that you need to save the Earth to save your family? These characters are written in a way where you don't particularly feel like they've lived for 7,000 years as well. They don't have an ominous presence or the wisdom that comes with being alive for that long. Now, the twist of the film was having Icarus be the loyal soldier to the Celestials and being evil all along. Now, this had absolutely no shock value to me at all because I didn't really care for any of the characters. And of course, they were going to stop the Celestial from destroying the Earth because there were so many Marvel movies coming out, so the threat of this Celestial actually forming was never present. Speaking of never present, where were any of the other Avengers? When some giant statue is coming out of the ground, surely Doctor Strange could have felt something, or Wakanda would have had the technology to detect Earth tremors. It was just such a messy story, and when it comes to Avenger level threats, there was not one Avenger to be seen. This is literally world ending and not one person showed up. It just makes it feel incredibly disjointed from the MCU, and if this movie never happened, it wouldn't impact the overall MCU in any negative way. Angelina Jolie's character as well, Thena, has this arc where she just loses her mind and she's having these episodes where she's remembering past lives. But this was all just wasted, and every episode was just placed in a time to further inconvenience the Eternals team. It always happened at a bad time, and it was so repetitive. One of the characters even acknowledges this, saying that this is a poor time for her to have another episode, and her breakdowns just served as an annoying hurdle to further split the team. It was a convenient subplot that just went absolutely nowhere. The movie also tries to throw moral dilemmas of saving billions of lives here or allowing the birth of a Celestial to grant new life on another planet. I haven't spoken to anyone who agrees that the Earth should be blown up. Of course, people are going to make the selfish decision to keep this Earth that they live on. To me, it was just a weak attempt at trying to be deep and philosophical, but the entire execution of this premise just fell flat. Now, yes, there are two end credit scenes, one where Harry Styles turns up as Thanos' brother, and one with Kit Harington opening a sword that hints to him becoming the Black Knight, and a voice off in the distance that says, "Are you sure you're ready for that?" And it has also been confirmed now that that voice belongs to Blade. So my final thoughts on the movie was that yes, it overall was okay. It's not as bad as what people make it out to be, but it does very little in terms of adding value to the MCU. If you go in with low expectations and don't nitpick or anything, the movie will be fine. It is fairly mediocre, so you might get bored, especially at a 2.5-hour runtime. If you go in and start questioning things like I did, the film falls apart under its own rules. The story and the characters never met their potential, and I'd probably never watch this movie again. It was an okay time at the cinemas, but really not one worth revisiting. But guys, those are my thoughts on the Eternals. If you've seen it, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. And if you like the video, please go ahead, leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. Take care and stay safe out there, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.